Most of us developed coping strategies as a way to deal with unpleasant emotions about ourselves and the world, to avoid discomfort and to be safe. And our body's primary objective is self preservation and to keep us safe at all times. And this objective in itself is neutral, but it can manifest in many unhealthy ways when this mechanism is not fully and consciously understood. And this is the difference between conscious and unconscious processing. Because many of us operate from patterns that are largely unconscious and simply execute the software programs that were installed throughout our life, but primarily in childhood. And the parts of the brain responsible for critical thinking and regulation develop gradually through childhood and into early adulthood. But before that, we operate much more through emotional processing, which makes us highly susceptible to our environment. We literally become like emotional sponges, and we don't yet have the capacity to critically evaluate what is happening, so that everything that happens to us automatically means that it means something about us. Our worldview is very self centered in that sense. Let me give an example. When an adult meets someone who's angry, spiteful, vengeful, or just plain mean, they can recognize that even if that person attacks them verbally, and hopefully only verbally, it is a reflection of the other person, not necessarily a statement about their own worth. At least adults with a certain level of emotional maturity can do this. However, as kids, we lack this capacity. We are in our feelings, and if someone is mean to us as children, we automatically assume that something is wrong with us. And this is how what I call fractures in consciousness begin to develop. When we enter this world, we are one whole being. We don't question our worth, our expression, or our place in the world. We simply just are. But as we grow, we are exposed to people who already operate from their own conditioning and coping strategies. And those strategies can be hurtful. For example, around the age of 2 or 3, we begin to develop a sense of self. We start expressing what we want and what we don't want. And at the same time, we are not yet able to regulate our emotions. So they come in waves and they can feel very overwhelming, right? A typical situation is that a child wants something and the parent says no. And an emotionally attuned parent would acknowledge the child's feelings, help them move through the disappointment, and model that it is okay to feel big emotions without always acting on them. And this is how children learn both emotional regulation and empathy. But when the same situation happens with a parent who is not emotionally attuned, often due to their own conditioning, then the response can be very different. They might dismiss, shame, yell, or try to shut the child down. And if this happens repeatedly, the child begins to learn that what they feel is not okay. And this is where the first fracture forms. And this fracture creates a form of programming that begins to operate alongside our authentic self. And because the primary objective of the body is self preservation, this programming acts in ways that are designed to ensure safety, even if those ways later become limiting. And over time, more fractures can develop when we don't fit in and feel excluded, when we are ridiculed, when our truth is misunderstood. We begin to learn that it is safer to be different from what we truly feel. And we start filtering ourselves in order to gain validation, approval, and connection. And I observed that most fractures in consciousness are created to protect one of 4 core areas. Let's start with safety. Programming related to safety ensures that we stay within what is familiar, that we stay within our comfort zone, and anything outside of that is perceived as threat. And the limiting belief of this fracture is that I am not safe. Then there's worth. When we repeatedly receive the message that we are not okay as we are, we develop the belief that I am not worthy. And from there, we create strategies to compensate. And when it comes to connection, when we experience rejection, inconsistency, or emotional pain in relationships, we may develop the belief that I have to earn love. And this can lead to people pleasing, self abandonment, or on the other side, also avoidance and emotional shutdown. And then there's expression. When we are ridiculed or dismissed for expressing ourselves, we may develop the belief that it is not safe to be seen or to speak up. And this can suppress creativity, truth, and authenticity. The more fractures in consciousness we have, the more energy goes into maintaining them, and the less capacity we have for love, empathy, and depth of feeling towards ourselves and others, because so much of our energy is used to preserve those protective patterns. And these parts do not have access to our full, authentic self. They operate from a limited perspective, but with a very clear objective, and that is to protect. So we reach adulthood and wonder why we feel anxious, disconnected, or not fully ourselves. And we perform different versions of ourselves depending on which fracture is activated in a given moment. And there are things that we want to do or achieve, but at the same time, we carry beliefs that we are unsafe, unworthy, unlovable, or that it is better to stay hidden. And now that we begin to see this, the natural question would become what do we do with this? And we have different options. Some people choose the path of pushing through, where the core statement is that I feel unworthy, but I will prove my worth no matter what. And it can work for a while. You can build confidence, identity, and success and become very highly ambitious, driven, and focused on achievement. But underneath that, there is often a deeper dynamic at play. There is this hunger, a need to prove, to become someone, and to be seen as enough, to finally feel safe through status, wealth, or recognition. And the more you achieve, the more this identity is reinforced. But it is still built on a fracture, which means it can never fully settle. There will always be another level to reach or another proof to provide. And it can look powerful from the outside. These people can be very charismatic, successful, and appearing very much in control, but there is often a quiet emptiness internally. Because in order to build that identity, a person had to disconnect from parts of themselves, from their vulnerability, from their emotional depth, and from their authentic expression. And honestly, this path is valid because we all have the freedom to choose it. But it often comes at the cost of true contentment, peace, and connection. Because the system is still operating from protection, just in a more refined and socially rewarded way. So, if we want to return to our authentic self, we need to go in a different direction. Not away from what we feel, but into it. Our fractures in consciousness were created through experiences that carried emotional pain. And if we want to become whole again, we need to be willing to feel what those parts could not process at the time. We can't simply get rid of them because trying to eliminate them would only reinforce the idea that parts of us are wrong or unacceptable. So we begin to understand them instead, to see that they were created to protect us, and that from their limited perspective, They were doing the best they could. And I want to emphasize something here. Healing is not about fixing what is broken. It is about teaching the parts of us that forgot how to love themselves, again. And we do that by meeting them with the very thing they were missing when they were first created: understanding, presence, empathy, and love. And this is what I mean by conscious emotional processing. It means allowing ourselves to feel what is there without immediately trying to fix it, override it, or escape it. And yeah, this can feel uncomfortable, sometimes even very intense, because we are turning towards something we have spent years avoiding. But when an emotion is fully felt and processed in awareness, it begins to lose its charge and intensity. And the same emotion can be activated again, but they are not experienced in the exact same way, because what comes up is often the deeper layer of the same theme that is ready to be integrated. And this builds capacity over time: capacity for feeling, presence, empathy, and love. And it might feel heavy in the beginning, like there can be a lot to process, but this is not something you will be stuck in forever. Because as more layers integrate, the experience becomes more subtle and less overwhelming. And the primary key is allowance, not judging what we feel, but allowing it. And once we begin to clear the heavier layers and build this capacity, our relationship with emotions changes. They come and go more naturally. They don't overpower us in the same way. And we begin to have more influence over how we respond internally. And we are not controlling our emotions, but we are no longer being controlled by unprocessed emotions. And as more of these fractures integrate, also more energy becomes available. And that energy returns to our authentic self, because authenticity requires capacity. And when the system is constantly engaged in protection, that capacity is limited. And we also begin to recognize these fractures, these parts, more clearly. And some people relate to them as archetypes or personas. And for me and my methodology, I prefer personas, because using that language for me indicates a part of me from a neutral perspective. And you can learn their somatic signatures. You can notice when they activate and meet them in real time with awareness. And as they begin to feel safe, they soften. They don't disappear, but they no longer need to take over, because they know that they are now safe with you. And this is a skill most of us were never taught, how to actually feel our emotions. But when you learn it, the way you perceive yourself changes. And the way you perceive reality changes with it. And you begin to experience your worth, your safety, your connection, and your truth from within, not as something you have to earn, but as something that was always there. So if there is one thing I want you to take away from this video, it is this: nothing in you was ever wrong. The patterns you developed made sense. They protected you. They got you here. But they are not all of you, and they don't have to define what comes next.